Hi, everybody. How's it going? This is Christian with Liberty After Dark. Today, we're going to be doing episode 2, Conversations with Dan, part 2. Fantastic conversation with Dan about the non-aggression principle, mostly lots of interaction with the live stream comments. So, lots of really good stuff here said. Stick around to the end for some last-minute commentary and some notes on the show. Other than that, please enjoy.
So Skylar here, just to address his comments, he's kind of had a string of them, and we've been on this discussion, so I didn't want to derail us, but this is kind of relevant. He says a right is only real so long as you can defend it, and at some level it becomes an act of aggression. Men will always take them otherwise. So that's the whole reason why I think the NAP is so important, because the non-aggression principle is in some extent a misleading name, but the primary principle, just for anybody who isn't aware, because we do have like 9 to 10 people here, I hope you all are aware, but just in case you're not, the fundamental principle is if there has been no aggression done to you, you should not initiate any use of force or aggression. And the NAP also facilitates you using a appropriately measured response to aggression against you. So if someone comes at you, with a knife or something, you should be able to defend your life against them. If someone, angrily yells at you, you're going to have a lot harder time of why you just blew them away with your fully automatic shotgun. You have to use a measured response to the force that's applied. So yes, I will say that if you defend your rights, at some point you will have to initiate some kind of act of aggression. I would say that's a fair assessment, but that doesn't mean that is an immoral use of it. There is such thing as a proactive defense, right? So if you can justify yourself within the NAP, I don't see. I'm not saying that you are posing this as kind of like a rebuttal to what we were saying, but I don't think it would succeed as one if that is what you're trying to do, and I don't want to frame it like that, but.
Well, I have a question, and this is something I've been rolling around in my head for a little while. And one of the things that people say is once an act of aggression has been committed and the person who committed that act has ceased committing the act of aggression, do you have the right to seek justice? And I guess the best example I can think of would be someone. Well, you're not married, you have kids, right?
Yeah, no.
So let's say. You were married and your wife was being attacked in her home, you would have every right to stop that person up to and including ending their life. Correct? I mean, that would be a major response to someone attacking your wife.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, I would support that as a measured response. But
so what would it be a violation of the NAP if you knew the attacker? And when you showed up, they escaped and went home. Would it be a violation of the NAP for you to go to their house and assault them up to and including killing them?
Yeah, I would say it would be a violation of the NAP. So, and to go into why, just to make sure that everything is as accurately conveyed here as possible. So when the altercation is going on, is an immediate threat upon someone's life and liberties, right?
Yeah.
So let's say your wife was killed in this example. Let's just put it that way. It's a tragedy. I hate to even put that scenario out there, but let's just say that's what happened, right? You didn't get there, but you know who did it. He left you a note, put his name on it, put his thumb. Everything matches up. It's him. So if you were to then go and murder him. That without him trying to aggress to you first, you couldn't claim that it was a defensive action, right? It would be just another violent reaction to a violent attack without any NAP situation to back yourself up. So you could, in this case, there are a couple ways that it could go down, and this is where you run onto two lines of thinking, which is why I have to say that it's not a NAP violation, because that you're not supported in the NAP by doing this, is that you either run down this path of where you just go on this like long string of avenge killings of like, he killed my dad, now I'm going to go kill him, because he killed, or my dad killed his wife, and then, oh, your son says, he killed my dad, so now I got to go kill his son because, and you go on this huge string of avenge killings and nothing ever happens and then everyone dies. And no one wants to see that happen. But if we start giving this cycle of, well, he wasn't, he was aggressor outside of a situation where he was being the aggressor, you always open yourself up to that possibility. So what we have to do is we have to say that, now, if you're in a completely lawless region, I would hope that you are in some kind of township that would have a NAP response to this. But you would first prove that the NAP was violated, right? You would say, just kind of similar to how you would call the police, but not anywhere near a police force. So I hate making that distinction, but there is a similarity there, right? You would make a police report and say like, my property was violated or whatever, and then the investigation would happen. You would be a part of a township or a region to where they would have I call it a NAP response team, essentially, to where it could be volunteers or it could be paid security or something like that, but they would be people who exist as a third party to mediate these separated encounters, right? Because you would have to approach the next situation with the minimum use of force possible, and you would be in a township that would protect your rights and could to an extent issue penalties from it, right? That's how one of the reasons that you would be able to defend your NAP is if there's no agreement across the members of the properties, you run into a situation where there's nothing you can do to defend yourself outside of being an aggressor, right? And then you run into another NAP spiral. So you need some kind of third party to exist to be a mitigator to that. And a perfect example, and then I'll end this, is that, and I'll let you rebuttal if you have one. There's I can't remember what the name of the actual court is, but there's a private court. It deals with all marine encounters, right? So let's say your ship is stranded out in the middle of the ocean and you put out an SOS and a private person comes to pick you up. You guys sign an agreement, and this contract isn't legally bound by any country. It's just between you and them. And they tow you back and you say, nope, I'm not going to pay you. Okay, so you go to this private mariner's court at this point because there's no international law in this region for you to really bring up such an issue like this too. And they have no judicial authority to like throw you in prison or anything like that. But what they can do is they can ostracize you they'll put you on a blacklist if you never pay your fee, right? So the next time you go out in your boat and get stranded, you're on a blacklist that says, this guy didn't pay his fees. He doesn't respect the agreement that we as mariners had signed to, which he signed to in his contract whenever he was picked up or agreed to voluntarily, and has lost the right to this service. So you then come up with things like, depending on the violation, you can ostracize someone from the community. You kick them out of the township. They've revoked the right to their property or whatever based off of the violation. And obviously it has to be an equivalent or a reasonable exchange. So, but I'll go ahead and let you continue.
Well, the only thing I would say in response to that is you talk about, I guess you could call it the Hatfield-McCoy Effect. As you say, well, if someone were to kill my wife and then I go kill them, I knew they did it, and then I go kill them, and then one of their family members come and kills me, and so on and so forth down the line. And that started, the Hatfield-McCoys actually started with I believe it was a pig that was either killed or stolen. So it was a violation of property rights to begin with, the start of the whole thing. It's basically spiraled out of control. But I would argue that if someone was attacking my wife and I were to stop them with lethal force, then that same spiral could happen. Even with all the proof in the world, you could still have that spiral. And I agree with you that if someone were to murder my wife and then go home, that it would probably not be a good idea to go and seek them out. But I don't know if it's directly a NAP violation for me to go and seek justice. Because, and I'll say this, because if I go to a third party, let's say an arbitrator of some kind, and I present my evidence and they find him guilty and then exacts justice, you can say, well, it's just because a third party went and took part in it, but you're still violating their natural rights either way. If I go and kill them immediately, their right to, the nap has been violated. And then if some group, whether or not they've contracted to agree to the rules of that group, they're going to deprive them of life and liberty too. And you can say, well, there's contract law, they had to agree to it, so on and so forth. Would not be a nap violation, but I don't know. And it's kind of a gray area for me. And I hesitate to use the example, but I'll use this example because I've discussed this with Annalisa before. We've chatted with her about it, and we talk about if I have two kids. If someone were to touch my kids, I would kill them. I don't care. I don't care in this modern society. If someone were to touch my kids, they would die. Period. End of story. And I don't care if I violated their nap or not. You're not going to hurt my kids. And I guess that's the standpoint I come from. That I don't. At that point, I really wouldn't care if I were violating the nap or not. But I don't think I would be. I don't see that. Now, if I contract other people to do it, like if I go hire a hitman to kill them, I think that would be a nap violation. But if I go and take care of it myself, then I don't think it would be.
Well, I mean, just to kind of just rebuttal that for a second. Not that I think I am a very emotional person. So, I think there's a chance, just with the dog example, I think there's a very good chance I could have just lost my mind, which would have been a horrible decision and probably would have wound up getting me killed or something. But, trust me, I can understand that there are moments where we just are emotional people, and the nap doesn't matter at that point, right? People are going to do things that. But what I will say is that you would be, what the nap is, right? So you understand what the rules are, and if you voluntarily make the choice to break them, you are accepting the consequences of that decision. Yeah. So. I can't tell you, you couldn't do that. Obviously, you're well within your faculties as a human being to do whatever you want. You could walk into a park tomorrow and beat someone up if you wanted to, but you would be accepting the consequences of that decision, especially if you interjected yourself into a place where, you already had an agreement that you would uphold the nap, which is where I would hope that most communities were like that. So Ryan here says, if you see an innocent person being victimized, you violate the victim's nap by not helping them. That is not the case.
I don't agree with that either.
There's nothing. I don't think
you would be. I think if you did help them up to the point of lethal force against their attacker, you haven't violated the nap.
Yeah,
but if you don't help them, I don't think you've done anything wrong.
Yeah, and again, this is, appropriate use of force. So, if it's just like shoving, I think you would have a hard time claiming a nap violation if you came up and shot him in the back of the head. But, if someone's getting beaten within an inch of their life, and you come up and you diffuse the situation from the attacker, so this is where it's really important that we have to understand that when you're interjecting yourself into the situation between two parties, is that you have to have the facts, So let's say you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's pinned to the ground, and he's beating this guy up. Well, he could be beating up an assailant, someone who violated his nap. So this is where you really have, and this works the same way in modern law. So I don't think this is just an issue with the non-aggression principle. You have to make sure that you're willing to accept the consequences of you being wrong whenever you put yourself in that situation. Because if you kill a defender from an assailant and you think that you're trying to protect someone's nap, you haven't. You've killed someone who was protecting their nap. That's a nap violation. You're just another nap violator. And so
a lot of that's going to come down to the old Benjamin Franklin axiom, mind your business. So if I know someone and I see that they're being assaulted, I would probably intervene. But if I don't know someone and they're being assaulted, I don't know that I would. I mean, I guess it would depend on the severity of the assault. like, I guess if someone were on top of the other person, beating them to a pulp, maybe I would. But if it was just a shoving match, I think I'm turning the other way and hurrying along.
Yeah, and you would use, I would hope that if you were to approach that situation, unless there were already like weapons drawn and bullets flying, I would get out of there first off. But you would use the minimum use of force. So if you see a fight, you wouldn't shoot the guy. You'd probably try to pull him off first, unless there was like a weapon involved. Or you would give him the opportunity, like get off the guy. You have the advantage in that situation, So there are opportunities to diffuse it instead of just walking up and shooting someone. But so Amy here has a good point. I don't agree. What if I can't be safe when trying to help them? Let's say I'm a 120-pound woman and these two 6'5" guys are beating the crap out of each other and I don't have a gun. I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I could be assailed like that. That's a ridiculous standard to put on people. And I feel like I'm being super harsh, and I'm sorry. I think I could be wording this better, but I just. That's a really important distinction. Is I don't want anybody to feel like that you are compelled to put yourself in a position to where you could become an aggressor, especially if you don't have all the information.
Absolutely. And I think when I don't know what your religious background is. I think you said you were atheist or agnostic. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm agnostic, a practicing atheist, but I have a very large background in Christianity. So
you've heard the oh my gosh, it's late. The guy on the side of the road. I can't remember what the name of it is. This is terrible. The Good Samaritan. Story of the Good Samaritan, where the guy's on the side of the road and he's been beaten. Robbers have beaten him, and a priest passes by and leaves them be and kind of ignores them, walks to the side. Somebody else passes by. I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember the story exactly. It's late, so don't fault me for not remembering. I know the story. My mind's a little foggy right now.
You're all right.
The Samaritan comes by, and Samaritan at that time, like the Jews and the Samaritans didn't associate. It would be like I don't know how to put it. I guess like the caste system in India, where the higher class wouldn't associate with the lower class. They wouldn't have anything to do with them. And the Samaritan comes along, this guy, and takes him to an inn and pays the innkeeper, says, let him stay here as long as he can. Here's some money. I'll pay you more when I come back and check on him and nurse him back to health, and so on and so forth. And in that case, like, the story is supposed to teach us that, you should help people no matter what, But I don't think people understand, like, I don't think that those people aren't, like, they're not merciful by not helping the guy. But at the same point, they don't know all the facts of the situation, why he's laying on the bed, why he's been beat up. And so, yes, they're I guess I want to say bad. They're not merciful. They're not nice people for passing them by, and so they shouldn't be looked on as good people. But at the same point, there's I guess reasoning. And their reasoning might have been, oh, I'm not going to get down there in the dirt and up and pull this guy up. But I think that there's a little point there that they didn't want to get involved with something they weren't involved in. So, no compassion. Anyways, they had no compassion. So, as much as the story is supposed to illustrate that we should help our fellow man, I don't. We need to highlight the good of the Samaritan that helped the guy, and not necessarily highlight the bad of the people that didn't. They weren't not bad people; they just don't want to get involved.
Yeah, and if you don't have all the facts, like we've said a dozen times, you risk putting yourself in a situation where you become a NAP violator, and that's not what you want to do. So Brandon says, and I want to make sure, just again, I'm going to just go through this really quick just to make sure it's clear, because he asked the question. Same example: if two 6'5" guys are attacking a 5'3" woman, are I think it meant you violating the NAP by helping. So we're going to work with a hypothetical here, and I'll go through this real quick. Let's say you carry on a daily, which I think, is typically a good thing. You can seal. So let's say you try to defuse the situation. They just keep assailing her. You don't have all the facts. You have to accept this, and then you have to, as an independent person with the capability to reason and logic through situations, you have to decide: am I going to use whatever use of force I deem as necessary to get these guys from stopping to attack her? Because for all you know, before you rounded that corner, she could have just held them up at gunpoint trying to take all their stuff, and now they're assailing her to defend their NAP. So. If they were in the wrong, like if they were just mugging this woman, no, you wouldn't be violating the NAP by helping her. You would be defending her NAP. If it turns out that she was assailing them and then you shot them, or, and this is one of the places where I will pose a situation where you could say it's perhaps not a NAP violation because you're minimizing the aggression that's going on, but you're still interjecting yourself as a third party, so it's up in the air. But if you just diffuse the situation, let's say you pulled your firearm and you said, okay, you guys get off of each other, stop, like we're going to figure out what's going on here, and then we're going to take care of this, right? So, at that point, you would have more of a case that, you took the most reasonable stance given the situation because you didn't have all the facts, and, So that's just another way of approaching the same situation. But yeah, the Good Samaritan, it's biblical, Dan. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was clarified because it was asked directly. So it's a very important thing, though. I'm glad there's a lot of conversation about the NAP here. Seems like there's a little bit of disagreement and agreement both ways, but I think the NAP is pretty clear. So it's this is one of the places too where I think I disagree with a lot of people, is that a lot of people, especially in the ANCAP community, which can confuse me sometimes, talk about, the only way we're going to have an ANCAP society is if we start, a civil war and a revolution or something. And, just the first thing that comes into my head is all the people whose NAPs would be indirectly or directly and indirectly violated by a war like that. So the NAP's something that's really important to me, and I try to keep as consistent and following it as much as possible. So I'm glad that there's a lot of conversation about it, though.
I don't think Ancapistan is going to be the result of a violent revolution. That's not my opinion. I think it'll be technology. I think technology eventually will come to a point where government is rendered completely useless.
That's a possibility for sure. We talked about that the first time we streamed. Sean was on here and we were talking about automation and artificial intelligence and, just the future of the economy, the government's role in supervising people's lives, and how, a lot of it can be all these things that people want that the government provides can be applied in a market society for a lot of times, theoretically speaking, at a cheaper rate. So
yeah. So there's a good Spooner quote that I just happened to look over at my my other window with the Spooner quote, and it's a good one. So I want to read this one if you don't mind. This is from Spooner's book, No Trees. I don't know if it's a book or if it's a treatise or what it is. Anyway,
essay?
No Trees. Essay, yeah, it could be a long essay. So it goes, a man's natural rights are his own, against the whole world, and any infringement of them is equally a crime, whether committed by one man or millions, whether committed by one man calling himself a robber or by millions calling themselves a government.
Natural rights is one of the big talking points, especially inside of the ANCAP and libertarian circles. It's something that I've had to wrestle with personally as a agnostic practicing atheist, is just to be as specific as possible. But I think I've come to the point in my philosophical journey to where I like to come back to the what is deemed as the state of nature, which is also a highly debated term in people. So I personally have difficulties with the concept that we were ordained rights from a higher power, which, if you believe that, I don't think is an issue in any sense of the form. It's just another way of reaching the same position. But I do think that there are fundamental characteristics about being a human being, which I would call the state of nature, that carries the same weight and I think importance too. It's how we reach what you could consider our designed, if you want to use that word, our destination, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, that's my thing is, a lot of these, I guess, red staters, these Christian conservatives, and I see the thing is I think they call themselves Christians. I don't see them as Christian. I mean, I actually saw, I'm on an anarcho-Christian group, and there was a post on there that said, the more I read Scripture, the less I have faith in modern Christianity. I think that's very true. But a lot of these people, they don't even, they have no clue what, real Christianity is supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like. They say they do, and they pontificate about it, but they don't. And, in a conversation where they would talk to an atheist, like, they would hear you say what you said, and they would say, oh, this is completely wrong. Just because he's an atheist, he's completely wrong. I'm write him off and everything else, and not have a conversation. But even though we might disagree on where our rights originate from, the fact that they're natural and that we have them as a consequence of being human, we can agree on. And that's quick plug to Myers Osterday 2020. But I don't want to put words in Brandon's mouth, but I believe he is of the same philosophical point that you are, that he's doesn't believe. I don't think he believes in God or as deity at all. I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure he's an atheist too. But I know plenty of atheists that are wonderful people. Speaking of one right now.
Well, thank you.
So I don't like when I see people get so bent out of shape because someone has a different, I guess, religious viewpoint, philosophical viewpoint. We can make fun of socialists and stuff because they're communists, because they're idiots, because they don't see the forest for the trees. But just because we disagree doesn't mean we can't get along on the points we do agree.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say real quick, I think I kind of talked about this earlier when I was going through the whole 50 Shades of Libertarianism thing. As long as we have the same end goal and we just may have a different way of reasoning out how we get there, we can have a debate about that. That's fine. But what's important is that we can say, like, we're going towards the same point. We could say whether we want to take a train or a car or fly to get there, but we're all going to the same place, when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
So Skylar's kind of taking over the chat here, but I appreciate his questions, and he's got another nap one, and I think we talked quite a bit about the nap. So unless you guys want to keep going, supply questions, we can keep going with it. But
absolutely.
He said he says here, if I'm having a medical issue and society lets me die, is that a nap violation? I would just ask you if all of the people who don't have health insurance or can't pay for their things that die right now, are you violating their nap by not helping them? That would be my first question. And if you do believe that you're violating their nap, that is quite the claim, because the nap is specifically about aggression, and apathy is not aggression. It makes you, especially if I knew the person and I just watched them wither away and had the means to help them. You could by all means call me a heartless bastard for doing so, but you couldn't claim within the framework of the nap that I violated their nap. I just didn't, as an individual, deem their life-threatening issue to be worth my resources, which again makes you a huge dick, but isn't isn't a NAP violation.
And I think that goes back to the Good Samaritan analogy I was given, that the people that pass them by aren't necessarily bad people. They just don't want to be involved. And it's not my purview to take care of someone else. And I made a meme about that, and I think it's got Will Smith, and he's making a face like, what? And it says, my face when someone tells me forcibly taking my property to pay for someone's health care is compassion.
Yeah.
So, how is it, even if you're saving someone's life, if you take from me to do it, it's not compassionate.
Yeah, there has to be some kind of volunteerism for there to be compassion involved in it. You know, if you're compelled to do it, you're doing it because you were told to, not because you thought it was the right thing to do. I completely agree with that. The right to life, though. So the right to life in this case would be that you have the right for no one else to take your life away from you, right? Or to, like, you know, we could say you could argue that slavery is both a life and liberty violation, but if the right to life, it pretty much is specifically addressing someone, you know, killing you in some form or fashion, or basically putting you on the chopping block. No one is compelled to keep you living as long as possible. They can't make you live less than you should, you know, by natural means. That's the distinction there. And if someone feels forced to, I mean, if you feel socially obligated to help someone, that's not a NAP violation either. That just means you succumb to peer pressure.
And that's what you were talking earlier, I think, when I first hopped on about, free will, like the idea of free will. Like, do we really have free will if Dadman convinces us to, if Dad convinces us to give to a charity, is it our free will to give to that charity if he you know, speaks in such a way that we change our mind on whether or not we want to get to it? I would argue that if you know, we listen to the merits of what he has to say, and we're just like, well, hey, I deem this a worthy charity, then that's completely within my free will. But if he says, you know, you should give this charity, and I think, well, people will think I'm a good person because I give this. I don't know if that's free will. Is it? I mean, you're
still voluntarily. You're seeking it's. I would argue that it's not necessarily from compassion. You have an ulterior motive, but it's still free will that you did it. So, no one's compelling you to. Now, if you held a gun at your head and said you're going to donate to this charity or I'm going to shoot you, that's not your free will. That's you trying to preserve your right to life and complying with
government.
Yeah, it's government. Exactly. Exactly.
So okay, Amy has a pretty good comment about her son having a medical issue, and one of the possible treatments was not allowed by the FDA in the United States. Isn't that a NAP violation? If we left the country to get the treatment, we could have been investigated by CPS and we returned and have removed another FDA oath. Allow the treatment, worked before we had to make a decision. Well, it's not okay. I mean, it's not okay that the government would limit people's right to seek treatment. I mean, that is a NAP violation. So I guess in Skylar's analogy, like, it would be a NAP violation to prevent someone from receiving care, as in Amy's case, but it's not a NAP violation to not provide the care.
Yeah, so the biggest part of that is we could have been investigated by the CPS, and that inherently includes a threat of violence, right? You know, you're being investigated by the CPS. There's a possibility that they could confiscate your child or give you a fine or whatever. These are all, you know, things that underlying have threats of violence associated with them. So if the FDA barred the treatment, that's, first off, you know, we already have the liberty case of where your liberties of being able to voluntarily go through this treatment have been denied. So, but let's just forget that part. Let's say you went over and you couldn't do it here, and you went to another country, got it done, and came back, and then you were investigated by the CPS, that's just a double whammy at that point. So your liberty was being violated, and then your right to voluntarily seek treatment to prolong your life was being barred by the government. So, yeah, that is 100% a NAP violation.
Well, Annalisa asks, if the FDA is not approving treatment, where's the aggression? The aggression lies in that if Amy were to go and have her child treated by a doctor who would violate the FDA, then there would probably be consequences for that doctor and Amy, and that's where the aggression would come in. Not necessarily that they're being, that the FDA says that they can't seek treatment. The NAP violation would occur after the treatment was sought, and the consequences that would the aggression that would be put on Amy. The same thing with any other laws that we have to abide by. You could say speeding. A speed limit isn't violating the NAP, but me receiving a ticket for going 42 and a 35 is a NAP violation. I was fined for doing something that otherwise wouldn't be, my natural right to travel freely.
I'm going to disagree with Annalisa here. She said, but the FDA not approving a treatment is not a NAP violation. So again, this is, so we're just to elaborate really quickly, the fact that the treatment is barred. So let's say you got it done anyways, right? Even though the FDA did not approve it, right? So there's, if it's not an FDA approved treatment, and there would be some kind of enforcement involved if you did get the treatment done, whether it's against you, the doctor, both, and that underlying has a threat of violence associated with it. And the second that threat of violence appears, whether it's if you don't pay this fine, we're going to throw you in jail, or however extreme it is, you've officially put yourself in a situation where there's a NAP violation. That's why extortion is a NAP violation. They may not break your legs then, but if you don't do it, you're going to have your legs broken, and that's a NAP violation.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's like taxes. Like, if you don't pay your taxes, you haven't broken the law until you get caught. Well, that's the same way. It's not a NAP violation to have the law. It's a NAP violation when they exact whatever consequences that they deem necessary. That's when a NAP violation takes place.
Well, I mean, so, Annalisa says, as a former CPS worker outside of California, no one would have taken this kid away. So so even if it's just a fine, like I said earlier, you still have, if you don't pay the fine, you have to go to court, and you could get a bigger fine, or you could eventually get thrown in jail. Would be, I assume, if you just refuse to pay, they would either confiscate your property without your opinion or your consent, which that's a violation, or they would throw you in jail. That's a violation. So there's, again, it may not be an initial aggressive act. So I will grant you that. There's no immediate aggression, but there's the underlying threat of it, which still constitutes a NAP violation. Which is why someone's saying, like, if there's a credible threat that someone's going to try to kill you, that's a NAP violation. And you can appropriately, it doesn't mean you can go kill the person to stop them, but you can appropriately respond to that, Well,
that reminds me, really quickly, I don't mean to change this up, but I want to interject real quick, because that reminds me of something else that a lot of people use to, debunk libertarianism when they say, well, people shouldn't be allowed to yell fire in a movie theater. And my stance on this is that if I yell fire in a movie theater that's not on fire, I would consider that fraud. I mean, do you disagree? Would that be fraud if I say the movie theater is on fire and it's not on fire?
I guess that kind of goes in the same claim as like making a baseless threat, right? Like you're doing it to cause, disconcern in someone. But if you're not presenting like, oh guys, I'm about to make a joke, no one get upset. You don't preface it with some kind of like, there's no actual threat here. You're putting the people in a position to where they believe that their life is threatened. So yeah, I think exactly. Yeah, I just kind of had to mull through that for a second because I've never thought about that one.
Yeah.
But yeah. Sorry,
Skylar. Essentially, we chose. He said, essentially, you chose my death. He's on. I guess he's still on the. If we don't help someone in a medical situation, we're choosing death for them. I don't see that at all. Like, I don't.
If your condition was not brought about by me, I'm not choosing anything for you. It was already chosen. My intervention would be the prevention of that. So I'm not altering the situation in any way, shape, or form by being a non-player. If I caused your affliction, if, like, let's say, I don't know, I force-fed you sugar for 10 years and you got diabetes and then you needed insulin and you couldn't get it and you were going to die, then you could say, all right, well, you were compelled because you brought this condition upon somebody to, you violated their NAP by giving them this threat to their life. You know, maybe they need financial compensation is the appropriate response to that, or whatever. You know, we could go down that crazy train, but unless you are directly responsible for the condition that is afflicting them, then you don't have any compulsion to prevent what would otherwise just be a natural occurrence. As shitty as that is, I agree. I mean, yeah, if I could afford to help someone and I don't, it makes me a dick. But it's not like this. It's not like I'm putting them on the you know, I'm not tightening the noose around their neck. I'm just watching as nature does it for them, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Elisa said it's cold, but it's not a NAP violation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, okay. So then Skylar said, if you stood there with immediate remedy and then you chose death. So if I was standing right next to you and I had the cure to your disease in my hand, and I just watched you die, I'm a non-player in that interaction. So, yeah, you 100% would be A-okay with using every curse and damning phrase you know about me, because that's just horrible. But, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you're keeping it for yourself. If it happens to you one day and you deem your self-preservation over the other person in this exchange, in this case. So, it's just, you know, we can create these ultimate, you know, theoretical scenarios, but at the same time, if you're not directly involved with the affliction, you don't have any compulsion to remedy it. It just makes you a bad person.
Yeah. Well, isn't there something in the Hippocratic Oath about doctors being expected to help, but they're not required to help? Isn't there something? Isn't there?
I don't know the Hippocratic Oath by heart.
We're trying to help. I don't remember that. Maybe someone in the comments would know. Maybe Annalisa would know to elaborate on that a little bit. But if I remember right, I think they're. I know the one thing is the do no harm. So is that the only? Yeah, she said do no harm. But if I remember right, I took a couple law classes when I was in college, and they went over this, but I can't remember exactly what the I guess the wording is on it. But if I remember right, doctors are not expected. Well, I guess they're expected, but they're not compelled to help people in a situation. Like if someone's had a heart attack and they, you know, I guess the old airplane thing. If someone's had a heart attack on the airplane, they yell for a doctor. The doctor doesn't have to come forward.
Yeah, I mean that would be the smart way to phrase it, because if you phrase it any other way, you could put it to where a doctor would be jeopardizing his Hippocratic Oath if he didn't put himself in a dangerous situation. So the easiest way to phrase that would be to allow people to assess the situation and then approach it as necessary, you know. And I would hope that a doctor would do whatever he can in a situation where he would still remain safe. You know, I hope he would come forward on the plane, but you know, again, if it was worded differently, then you could have, well, the doctor has to run up to the burning car that could be seconds away from exploding, and he shouldn't feel compelled to uphold his Hippocratic Oath above preserving his right to life, you know?
Yeah, and that's when Skylar says, if you're standing with an immediate remedy to cure the disease, I would like to think if I were put into that situation, I wouldn't stand there and watch the person die. Like I wouldn't. That's something you'd have to live with for the rest of your life if you have the cure. But there again, let's say for hypothetical sake that Skylar's laying in a hospital bed and he's dying of a disease which I have the remedy for, and one of my children is laying in a hospital bed next to him, and they have the same disease, and they're going to die, but I only have one remedy. It's not a NAP violation to give that remedy to my child instead of him.
Yeah.
So,
Skylar, I appreciate your rigorous dissection of the NAP, but I don't want it to sound like we're just saying the same thing over and over again. So I'll give this one another attention, because it is a slightly different situation, or more reiteration of a previous one. But again, the defense of rights can absolutely become an act of aggression in many ways, this violating the NAP. And so I just thought of a situation, and we'll go through this real quick, of where, let's say you're with your family, right? And someone comes up and, I don't know, let's make this the most ridiculous situation where you could become an assailant but still be protecting your NAP. He comes up and he says, "I'm going to kill you all," and then reaches into his pocket, right? Your first reaction off the top of your head should probably be, "Oh my God, he's going to try to kill us." So, because he's given you no reason to think otherwise. So you sock him in the jaw, knock him out, and you were the initiator of force. But there was already an underlying threat there. So if your rights are being violated, there is some sort, if your right to life, liberty.
Yeah, the original quote was life, liberty, and property.
Yeah, life, liberty, and property. Yeah, there we go. So that's a much easier case to defend. But property, if those three things are being violated, there's already either a threat of violence or violence is being perpetrated. So, and so again, this goes back to the situation of, if a crazy man walks up to you and says, "I'm going to kill you," and then reaches into his pocket and you blow him away with your fully automatic shotgun, and turns out he just, had an apple in his pocket. He's like, "I don't." So first off, it's like the man who threatened you put himself voluntarily in the situation to where he could have his life ended like that. So I will concede that it can be an aggression, but again, I think I've said this like twice, but I just want to make sure it's very clear. An act of aggression, premeditated, or not premeditated, but in a response to a threat that you deem as credible through, rationalization, which we're all capable of as human beings, is not a NAP violation. You're 100% within your rights to do that, as long as it's inappropriate. Now, if a 5-year-old comes up to you and says you're going to kill them all, or he says he's going to kill you, and then, it doesn't do anything to suggest that he's going to kill you, just stands there and looks at you, I would probably say that you exceeded your NAP credentials if you killed him. But, again, this is why we have to be able to rationalize through these things. There's a million scenarios, billion, I would say, of individual scenarios that you could craft to explain the NAP, but there is a certain rigidity to it. So
I agree with you there.
All right, well, that's the end of episode 2, Conversations with Dan, part 2. Lots of fantastic stuff here said. Just for some ending notes, obviously I'm not going to rag on myself too hard with the same things I said in the last episode. If you listen to that, it was, lots of similar things because it was all done in the same recording, ands, whatnots, a couple of maybe not the most accurate statements made, but, listening back, I realize how terrible of an analogy I did at describing this whole NAP response force thing, but, nobody's perfect, and it'll be something that I think about whenever this conversation comes up in the future. But nonetheless, fantastic conversations had by all. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast distribution platform, whether that be Apple, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, YouTube, whatever that may be. We're available on all of them. Don't forget to give the show a 5-star review if you really enjoyed it, or 4-star if you think you could use some work. If you guys want to get a hold of me, you can reach me at contact@libertyafterdark.net with any suggestions, or if you want to be a part of the show. Thanks for coming out.